Hi everyone, Julia here with James, and it's October 25th, 2022, new moon. So hopefully everybody's been putting their intentions out there. It's good to do that every day, but especially during a new moon. And James has a really cool drawing. Do you want to go into some detail about that, James?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It'll be the thumbnail for this video.
Right, yeah, it's sort of just from the imagination, really. So what it represents is it's facing your shadow self. So there's just one character in that picture, effectively. So you've got the suppressed divine feminine, which is also a bit like a Grim Reaper figure, because it means stepping through a doorway. She's sort of beckoning to sort of take the next step on the spiritual path, and the eyes in the background that's you facing yourself, the sort of terror of having to take that first step. I've been thinking about this whole spiritual journey and where does it begin, and I'd say for a lot of people, and it seems a common factor from testimonies of different people, their experiences, you have that what I call the wall of Jericho moment, where it feels like the world has collapsed around you. It could be something like a mental breakdown, or you suddenly are aware of this onset of deep depression. It can come out as anxiety and probably many other forms as well. Panic attack being I see that as being related to anxiety. And I feel that's you get to a stage in your life where the spiritual side is trying to communicate, and you can sort of liken this to that sort of cliche sort of scene of somebody throwing pebbles up at an upstairs window. They don't want to wake the whole household, they just want to get the attention of one particular person. It's normally like a sort of a secret romance in a lot of these things. But like in that scenario, it's like the little grains don't really sort of get the attention, so you end up throwing a slightly bigger stone is thrown. And of course, if you throw too big a one and get it wrong, it breaks the glass. So you can sort of see that in its deeper meaning. It's breaking a level of the veil, shall we say. It's letting the real light come through. It's not coming through glass. So this is what happens with when you have this crisis point that you get in a lot of people get in their lives. It's that sort of first step of waking up, but the pebbles and the bigger stones haven't got the attention. We're still stuck in the 3D aspect of life at this stage, but starting to not feel right at a much more heightened degree. And of course, this is like the mountain is now being dropped on you. It's like, right, you've been given opportunities by spirit to listen to yourself, and you go against your true inner feeling, and it can come out in many ways. I mean, I went through a phase of drinking alcohol, and I never really liked it, but I was trying to fit in, and I was on the point I could have been an alcoholic, and I stopped myself just in time, fortunately. So of course, the first thing when you get anything like this, the first thing we say to ourselves is, what is wrong with me? it's right in a way to turn the question inward, but the structure of the question is the wrong perspective. But of course, you've just got this new communication from the bodies. I would say that anxiety and panic attacks, it's almost like a static energy. Maybe the mind and the body are in conflict. It's a new sensation. The brain is that saying we're always the last to know. Well, the conscious brain is like, oh, don't recognize this coming from the body. I mean, you don't even sort of analyze it at the time.
It's
And
interesting that you described anxiety as a static energy, because in biofield tuning, that's what we find. We find stuck energy in the biofield and get it moving again. And it's supposed to, well, people claim that biofield tuning really helps with anxiety. It's one of the main, things that it helps with. So that's interesting that you said that.
oh yeah, that one you sort of recommended to me, and that 144 hertz, it definitely, I could feel it's almost like a physical feeling of a shift. It was that strong. And these blockages are that in our bodies are created, well, like everything, it's created from our thoughts, because our thoughts then have an interaction with the body, and it changes the balance and the chemistry of the body.
Right.
So
And a lot of our thoughts are created by our emotions, right?
definitely. Oh yeah. What one description of like the four bodies is to talk about it as the emotional body. It's like your whole nervous system. It resembles roots of a tree. It follows the same pattern. It's putting out feelers, quite literally growing inside you. It's very much like plant roots to look at. You've got the arteries and the veins, and of course, it's a series of nerve endings. So we've got this chemical, electrical interaction in these bodies. And yeah, I would say that to me, that's the only way I can describe it. It's like static electricity. The closest, I suppose, in sound is when you take a woolen jumper off and you get that, because obviously the bodies do generate electricity. That's why you get that static sound with wool. And we're so programmed to look at everything in a negative way, and because of when that happens, you can't see that it's going to be like a step finally in the right direction on this spiritual path. But of course, it then takes even further, because that's just the beginning. But even at that stage, you can't say, "Oh, I've had this experience happen to me, and I know it's good," because you don't know where it's going to lead at the time. So I also flip this. If I take now as the isometric marker between when I've had all these experiences, and from when, and looking back to where it began, and then like, wow, look how far I've come from there. So now if I look the other way and the same sort of time frame, it's like, this is really fantastic, because this could, if it's brought me from having a panic attack to now, it's fantastic. The depression side is that I feel that's more, it's like an awareness, but you then shut down. You create this hard shell around yourself. It's nothing's coming in, and you don't want anything to come. You don't want to go. You don't want to come out of that shell. That can become a real mental obstacle, because that's all it is. It's just in the mind. There's nothing physical about any of this. Whereas the anxiety and the panic attacks, that seems to be more the external manifestation of these sensations when we're not in control of them. I mean, the panic attacks, when you realize that you're having what a panic attack is, and you think, shit, I'm having a panic attack, that's the time to like, okay, I just need to do deep, slow breathing. And you can override that one really easily. But when it first happens and not having that, being armed with that knowledge, it feels like drowning. It's a terrible conflict that's going on inside. But I'm testimony that you can come out of it. And I wish that there was more sort of talk about this and start celebrating these things, not seeing them in their negative context.
Did you light your spliff at 4:20 on purpose?
Sorry?
Did you light your spliff right at 4:20 on purpose?
No, I didn't even notice the time. Oh, it's only.
But you know, Michael Harrell from Language Lessons of the Heart is always saying that the spiritual path and the emotional healing path are not the same, because the spiritual path is never ending, but emotional healing, there is an end to pain. So to me, that was really refreshing to know that you really can get to the point where you don't have anxiety attacks and depression and whatever else comes with that.
They actually become, you get to learn the language that the body is communicating in. Because for me, the early signs of a panic attack is like, it feels like you've got a butterfly in the stomach. But I haven't had it for quite a while now, but there is the odd little flutter if I know I've got to do something different, and sort of, and it's like, well, no, I can override that now. And it's like, I recognize the thing. It's like, no, you're not taking control. I look at what this reality presents, and then I look at its mirror version, and then I also look at what it's presenting. So, for example, in this sort of context, I'm trying to think how to describe this now. That I've got that thing where the thought is just dissolved in the mind, and it's like, it'll come back in a minute.
It's called a brain fart.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, even that, there'd be people out there who'd say, "Oh, you've got this or that." They diagnose you with based on something they think they know. I mean, for me, the greatest thing that's come out of this is that I'd heard about depression, for example, and I just thought it was some sort of like deep sadness and you can't get any enthusiasm, which is only part of it. But going through it, it's like, now if I'm talking to somebody who's got it, I can at least say, well, the way I got through this was, in the case of depression, that is a really easy one to sort out. You just need a handful of cashew nuts, maybe eat them once a week. Now you won't notice any changes whatsoever. If you say, right, I'm going to stop, or you leave it a couple of weeks, you don't eat any, oh, that comes back.
Microdosing magic mushrooms helps for everything. Just microdose. You take like 1/10 of a gram of magic mushrooms, and it handles anxiety, depression, ADD, insomnia.
These are all symptoms of this, what is called an awakening, a spiritual awakening. I agree that the emotional side is different from the spiritual path, but the emotional side is, I feel, is part of the early stages, or because if to overcome that makes the spiritual path easier to walk, because you're not then having to divert your attention to, I've got depression, I can't face going out today. So I feel that although it's separate, it's not separate at the same time. It's a big part of the spiritual journey, because I can't see how you could do the spiritual journey if you're in the throes of depression, for example. You're not going to you're not going to convince the senses of what you want to achieve.
But I think there's a lot of people that just try to live by the virtues. That's basically the spiritual path, right? Live by the 7 virtues, but they don't ever do the emotional healing. So they're very spiritual, but they haven't taken that path of emotional healing. So I think for a lot of people, they go through emotional healing into spiritual and beyond. But I think some people miss that aspect.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, this is good, having this conversation. I feel that if everything comes from inside us, well, then clearly you've got to get your own world, your own universe into some sort of new order. You need to create a new world order within yourself. I mean, this is a prime example of what the system is showing. It's actually dropping hints when you turn these things inwardly. So all the things that are going on, or would seemingly going on externally, are just sort of reflections. And I find they've got a lot of truth in them. They're actually quite a good guide. It's like lockdown. I hear that as go within and meditate. The masks I hear as being go into the silence. And I remember
And
saying,
master you for a lot of rituals too.
oh yeah. Well, this is a sort of unmasking of oneself, if you think about it. When you're facing your shadow self, and yeah, it's not pleasant, and it's sort of like an extensive. Nobody likes a photo taken and doesn't want to see their photo, as it were. Or they're not, or they become the worst critic of, oh, I don't like myself in that photograph. So it's sort of that's like a very superficial level in a way to what this is, because if I was faced with myself of 20 years ago or so, I probably wouldn't even want to know them. I wouldn't want to be their friend. I feel I've changed that much. I was definitely egoic, and it sort of kept me going in a way. But it, that's another part to address as well. It's like we have a meeting, we hold a World Economic Forum internally, and I look at the external representations and things. So when you look up at the sky, the zodiac signs are anthropomorphized into animals, or a man, or a woman. But you can see that that's not what they are, but it's just an interpretation. So it's like, well, I can do that internally with these emotions. I can actually create little caricatures for these emotions. I can give them a physical characteristics. I can turn them into a like real being. So I've now got this council of 12 who come and give their advice, as it were, or they're putting their case forward from their perspective. So anger will want to have a say, and love will want to have a say, and then you just weigh these things up inside. It's like the scales of Libra. It's the divine feminine that's blindfolded. So the sight and the weighing everything up is in the feeling. It's how you feel inside about everything. So I also like to use the analogy of picturing myself as a little wooden rowing boat, and I'm on a lake, and I want it to be perfectly still. I don't want choppy waters and being thrown all over the place like in the middle of an ocean, because in a way these bodies are rocked by emotions, energy motions. If you import a script that is offered, and you take that into yourself, it's generally from, I mean, people talk about the medieval age. Well, we're in the medieval age today. It's no different. It's just done with technology. You don't need to burn the books, and they can even argue that it's better for the environment, and you just hit the delete button on the internet and everything changes in a second. But we can learn a lot from what the system shows. It is actually guiding in a very twisted way, but there is a sort of spirit of truth in it. So my perception on everything has changed on how I view it. The thing hasn't changed. It's like looking at still life on a middle of a table, and you're walking around the table, so you're getting different views. You're seeing different areas of shadow, different areas of light, and it's still the same object, but you're getting a different view. And I'd rather see the world as I see it now than as I did before. The problem when you're faced with these early stages, there's numerous options you can take, and unfortunately, a lot of people seem to go down they are rabbit holes. It could be Valium or alcohol or a gambling addiction, something that temporarily lifts you out of that reality that you find yourself in. But of course, they're very temporary, and then you plummet. The quicker you get up, the quicker you come down. And of course, then you've got to try and maintain that high, which becomes impossible to do. With a drug addiction, it may be the cost of the actual drugs and things. So where does that go to? The addiction gets so strong it can end up with turning to crime, possibly even murder in extreme cases. So that's like a rabbit hole. You've then got the looking externally, you've got the whole truth seeking community. And it's a great shame that many of them I liken this to a hurdle race. Many have got stuck on the jumps. So they've stopped at certain points on certain topics, these sort of conspiracy theories and things. But all you're ever going to get from any of those is everything is a lie. That's still not going to give you the answer. All you're going to find out is everything you've been told and everything you thought was real is not.
Right,
So
and it's great if you're already at that point when you're introduced to stuff like archaics, because you already know everything's a lie, and so when you put it in the context of simulation theory, it all makes even more sense.
yeah, I've got no problem with it at all, because like Jason said on one, I listened to his latest one. Yeah, it was last night, and he's saying, look, I can only put it in the language that I've got to use to try and explain it. And this is the thing with all of it. That's shown throughout history. The ready example I can come up with is the iron horse to describe a train, because it's been described with the language of a people that's never seen one of these things before. To me, that sweeps away all this need to get all these little puzzle pieces to try and fit them together. He's done the chronology. I don't care if it's not even right. It takes it out the equation enough, because I can focus on the real internal work. going really deep within inside myself, doing that's where to do the deep dive. I mean, that is a rabbit hole that you have far more potential of getting to the bottom of, by its very implication about hitting rock bottom and building on a solid foundation. That is a fact in this material reality. You need a solid foundation if you're going to put a structure up. This is a structure inside the body, in the sort of unseen, non-physical. So that still needs its equivalent foundation. And if you look at the chakra system, the solar plexus is not at the bottom. You have to fall first. You've got to go down to the root to then come back up. You don't start at the solar plexus and go up from there. You've got to fall first. And if you look at the patterns with so many people that have started going down this a spiritual path, or questioning this reality, asking those questions of who am I, what is my purpose? And generally it starts with something what seemingly quite horrific. You find you're out of synchronization with the world. You feel lost. You feel alone. It's like you're no longer on that Titanic. You're now in the ice cold Atlantic. It's pitch black. You can't see which way land is at that point. It's very unpleasant, but it's a necessary step. And that's where you have to find that sort of inner glow, to use that ice cold water analogy. And your internal compass will take you to land. So you're then on a shore. You're on a solid foundation. It's expressed as Christ is standing on the foreshore and saying, "Cast your nets on the other side." And it's specific that it's 153 fishes. It's to do with handing over the controls, getting the dialogue going with the subconscious, the other side of the brain, rather than just staying in that 10%. Sorry, it's a mouthful of coffee.
Right. You know, and you have to change too. You can't just like, wake up and realize so many things and just keep going the way things were before. Everything changes.
Yeah, it's all about experience. It's the opposite of this material realm of. You notice that one of the selling points is like faster broadband, faster downloads, instant this, instant that. Don't need to cook anymore. Just eat. Just phone up and order it, and it'll come to you just like that. This is the opposite. This doesn't have a physicality to it. It's totally in the unseen, but it can come through. It doesn't seem that anything can go the other way, but it seems that from this non-material, it can come into the material, and you can get solid, objective objects, results quite easily. But you notice the narrative over the last two to 3 years has been about mandatory testing. So if we take that word mandatory, man, we can say is generic man. Man, so it's man, and then it's the death. Man die, and then Tor I. So Tor is a door, and then it's leading to this spiritual eye. And to take that conscious decision to, I'm just going to put my trust in the universe. And it's like, I've been pushed into this position. I've had this or that happen to me. And well, I say this or that happened to me. It's our own doing, our own decisions that put us in these positions in the first place. But how beautiful it is when you then see that where it's going to lead like this, and it's like, okay, it looks impossible. Now, is that not a test? A test of self-belief? That is the mandatory testing that you definitely want to be proving positive. It, see, the system is showing humanity that humanity are not hearing it. It's as far removed from when the body is sending up a sensation of anxiety or depression, and the brain can't understand what the body's saying. This is how far removed humanity is from what the media are saying, because I can hear things on radio and on news announcements, and it's like, I hear what you're really saying here. Maybe, okay, it's my interpolation of it, but there's certain little key words, and then when you start looking at like numerology, gematrias, and things, you start. There's a definite plan and blueprint behind all of this. There's so much in this world that I cannot verify. I've not seen for myself. I don't know it to be true, and that includes history. There is one idea that when you go to sleep at night, when you wake up, it's a whole new experience, where it's a whole new day anyway. And I can't say we haven't all, when you go to sleep and wake up again, you come into a different, very similar reality. The very nature of it just seems to be very holographic. It's an uncomfortable thought in a way, but it's a challenge. And
It's definitely holographic. I mean, how could everything be 99.999% as an atom and be solid? I mean, it's
yeah,
impossible, even though nothing's impossible.
yeah. Well, it's like using the radio analogy. If you're tuned to a frequency, there's no awareness of the other stations. You can't tune into those while you're on one frequency. You've got to move the dial, and when you're between stations, you get that distortion. There's just sort of anxiety and depression and things. That's static. But then you start moving to a different frequency, and I feel that we're still in the early stages of this. At the moment, you have a situation which I'm sure anybody that hears this will readily relate to, where you've tried to wake other people up to what's going on, and they just don't see it, they don't hear it, they don't hear what you're saying. So if you start,
Different frequencies.
yeah, I mean, I talk to people and they say, you're talking in parables, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm still using the English language. But what if we ramp it up a bit more and we'll start to visually fade out as well? I feel this explains, like that Mary Celeste. The crew are probably still there. They can't. It's that thing about you can't take it with you. Well, that physical ship probably can't go, but that crew are on another Mary Celeste in another reality that can't be tuned into from this one. I'm not saying it's true. It's just my sort of interpretation based on the experiences now, and this weird situation where you've got a language called English, and yet how it can't be understood by a lot of people. That's not even including the sort of legal version of English and all the things in terms and conditions. I mean, it's all right reading these words, but it's a huge difference between reading them and understanding what they're really saying. The Bible
Right,
is,
who knows what we've all agreed to just to get onto a website.
yeah, it's the same with all these ancient texts. And anybody who thinks the Bible has been left out the equation and is the true answer and read in a literal fashion, well, I'm sorry. You need to read it again and read it from an esoteric perspective. It's an amazing guidebook, but it's not the only guidebook. It's sort of tried to push everything else out. It's like the bully has got hold of it. It's a bit like Biff in Back to the Future. He's got this betting outcomes almanac, sports almanac it was, and I forget how it happens. I think the book gets taken back, and so he knows what the outcome of every sports event is going to be for the next 30, 40 years and makes a fortune. And that's pretty much what's happened with knowledge that was, I feel, was meant to be for everybody, but by its very nature, at some point, it needed those that understood it to explain it to others. But then within that, there seemed to be a faction that's like, hold on a minute, we can do very nicely out of this for ourselves. We're not going to share it, or we're only going to share bits of it. I mean, personally, I go with the idea that our creator, and when I say our creator, I'm talking about the creator of humanity in its present day form, is benevolent. But part of what it is attached to had another reason for wanting humanity created. It's an unpleasant thought that we were created as a slave workforce. And it certainly seems to look that way to me. And I would say if you look around the world today, just because you can't see the ball and chains, because they're financial mostly, doesn't mean they're not there. It's perception and how you feel about things. And my observation of this world today is the ball and chain is money. People, that's the saying, money is the root of all evil. No, it's not the root of all evil, it's the mechanism. Because it is a huge way of controlling people. You've got, there's no way Africa, for example, should be the continent that got left behind. It's got resources and things, but of course,
And the thing is, they print it out of thin air now too, so there's really no value in these notes. You know, every time I look at like a 20-euro note, I'm just like, I can't believe this has value. It's just such a crazy concept. But the truth is, we can manifest all that currency that we need, and that's what it is. It's currency. It needs to keep moving, and just like they print it out of thin air, we can manifest it out of thin air. But we don't know that, and we get stuck in that rat race of working and trying to pay bills. And like I said before, there are people that work full-time jobs and still can't afford to rent a place and have to sleep in their cars. I mean, how messed up is that? So yeah, definitely time to kick in your manifesting skills.
Well, this is where the majority of people, they haven't done the shadow work because they know they're unhappy, but they're not prepared to take a step in any direction because they don't feel they can do it. They have no belief in themselves that they can change anything. It's so ingrained about that sort of whole concept of I'm just me, what can I do? I'm insignificant, I can't change anything. Well,
When the truth is that we're gods in training. You know, even the creator is still creating and still evolving too, and has made mistakes, and maybe will make more mistakes. And we're kind of doing the same thing. And I think one of the things that we're doing here, especially this period of this realm where we're at now, as far as linear time goes, is we're starting to realize what our true powers are, that we really do. We really, really, really do manifest our realities. And before we can be given even more power to make it just like happen instantly, we really got to clean up, everything, clean all the inside up, the emotions and the mind, because, if whatever you think manifests instantly, then your thoughts need to be very pure and very meticulous.
Yes, definitely. Some of the things where I put a wish out into the universe, as it were, it's like I can't believe how quick they've happened, and it's like, oh, I've got to be very, because to give the sort of biblical sort of wording on it, it says, "In the beginning was the Word." Well, we're talking about spiritual anyway, so surely the Word would be those words in the mind, the thoughts, and it's like, oh, I've got to be really careful what I even think, never mind what I vocalize or actions, or it's got to go right down to that level. It's you've now got to overcome being judgmental because it's so easy. Like you see somebody walking towards you, and straight away, without a second thought, it may be the color of the clothing. You think, oh, I like that, or I don't like that. So there's a judgment. It's not with a bad intent. It's just a personal preference. It's subjective. But then it can be taken a step further. People can look at other people. Oh, look at them. They're morbidly obese, or they're severely underweight, or whatever the thing is, the observation made, and it sort of we're very programmed, mostly from school, because one of the things with school is about competing with each other. You've got to be the best. You've got to get the highest grades, and of course, you then get a polarity, two polarities. You've got the ones that are getting praised and the gold stars, and the ones that are being looked down upon and made to feel even worse.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
School
the way
sucks. Do not put your kids in school. Homeschool your kids.
well, there was a time when you would have had what would be classed as blue collar and white collar workers, and it seems to be forgotten that there's a lot of people that are very good with their hand, and they might not be academically brilliant, but practically brilliant. They're actually going to be better on a self-sufficiency, intentional community than the intellectual side, because they can just get on and do. Um, but in this society, it's like the one that makes me laugh the most is this new um, subject, which I think they do in colleges and universities, called media studies, and yet all this media studies, and they haven't worked out that it's all a lie. It's like I haven't done that course, and it's pretty obvious. So even if you don't sort of pay attention to the actual news stories, but look at the order, it's carefully thought out with a pattern to it to sort of give you highs and lows, but ultimately a low and leave you with a negative feeling. And I mean, if it's a television thing, you'll even have the presenter with a sad face. That it's like really bad acting. It's like that's not their genuine feeling coming out. It's like they're just putting on a sad face because this has happened normally in Ukraine at the moment. But it's like, oh please, that's an insult to my intelligence. If you think I'm gonna, some of them, it's like there's almost this, we teach you to be a children's presenter, and now you're going to talk to adults like they're 5 years old, and the very patronizing way of talking as well, I've noticed. And it's like, oh, and it the this is part of this perspective. Things I would have once watched and laughed at, I'm now thinking, actually, that's not actually funny at all. It's laughing at somebody else, at their misfortune, and it's like, it's not comedy. It's come die. It's awful, and it's like, oh, and it's like, that's all programming into us. It's like, no television at all for me.
Yeah, and so many people are just so well programmed. I mean, I know this man, he's like almost 70. He might be 70 now. And he loves to send those little memes where people get hurt really bad, and everybody wants to laugh at it. And this guy's
Yeah,
70 years old and he's still doing that. It's like, that's not funny to watch other people get hurt, but the programming is so strong.
yeah. It's there seems to be over probably ones in their 70s and 80s, the sort of previous generation. They're they're like very set in their ways and don't seem to. There's no reason why they can't if they do language lessons of the heart, for example. Like, it's never too late.
Yeah, Michael's 70.
Yeah, I mean, it, it's just having that essence inside yourself to at least be honest with yourself and say, I don't like my life the way it is. I want to find a way where I can change it, and at least give these things a try, because that's not the only way in, but I think it's a surefire way in, and you're not going to get fakers get through that one, as far as I can see. I think it's fantastic because it is doing the work yourself, but you're your own teacher and student anyway. Um, so much of this reality is all pushing to the external and looking for gurus and and this sort of thing. But your own guru, it's amazing seeing with the look in the eyes of really young children. They're like absorbing everything. They're really intently watching and taking it all in. And it's a shame they can't speak because they know more. You can see it, or I can see it in their eyes that they know. But of course, they can't vocalize it at that stage. But I see that is beginning to change. So
Well, telepathy will come more into play. So the really young will be able to communicate with their observing telepathically.
well, this is where even using this technology, it can often happen that I might check Messenger and oh, wonder if so and so's online, and I'll click on the message thread, and they happen to be typing, and I thought, well, this is good. These devices can be used equally in a good way as in a bad way. Same with this manifesting. You can have anything you want in this world. If you want to be a millionaire, be a millionaire. There's nothing to stop you being a millionaire if you really believe it. But it needs to be tempered with the empathy as well. It whatever you do, it needs to be done like you say on the end of every video. What was it? Always help others when you can. And
Can help a
it's
lot of people with $1 billion, huh?
well, with $1 billion, now that would take some serious thought of how can I maximize the potential of that to do the most good. As far as I can see at the moment, it would be setting up intentional communities, as many as possible, or or several anyway, and then getting a community building in place, and then hopefully people will sort of be drawn to it, and then get it going amongst themselves, and then use the internet to share the experiences. It's like, well, we tried growing this and this worked well here. This is this type of soil. All these sort of things. I mean, there's lots of channels that already do this. I can't think of a name of one off the top of my head, but I mean, I've picked up bits along the way. I could turn my hand to different things. I like with whatever's there. It's like, can those empty bean cans be used for anything? For example, these clear plastic lids and things. It's like, well, I'm sure they could be used as like a sort of propagator over the top of something else to start seeds off. There's loads of uses. It's like the phone stand is the bottom of an egg box. You can find,
Yeah. No new anything needs to be produced at this point or manufactured because we can reuse everything that's out here and make everything we need.
yeah, yeah. There's numerous ways of doing things. I mean, 16 bricks, you can create what is called a rocket chimney, and you've got to continuously feed it with very small twigs. Um, but it's an intense heat, and it's a very simple construction, and you can cook on it, and it's fairly well protected from the wind in its construction. I think it's like five bricks at the bottom, and then there's like air. There's gaps for the air, and then you start the, I think, second or third layer up. You put all the twigs in, and obviously you need to be prepared with a stack of them as well. But yeah, it's anything is doable. I mean, there's some beautiful houses being created in. I'm not sure if it's Mexico or New Mexico, and the basic wall construction is used car tires. So they're really thick walls, and one of them they made this almost like a church stained glass window. It's beautiful with the sun coming through it, and it's actually different coloured plastic 2 litre plastic bottles in the window, as it were. It makes a beautiful effect. And I would say, as long as you're not getting the extremes of hot and cold, um, because plastic garden furniture goes really brittle. People leave it out. It does something to its molecular structure, so it shatters a lot easier. It seems to get harder and less forgiving, as it were. But if you're in a more consistent climate, I mean, yeah, use the plastic especially. I don't think it's gonna. You might as well use it. What else can you do with a lot of these things?
Yeah,
Mind you,
it's like
plastic.
Sanford and Son around here. There's so much junk and stuff that can be repurposed. But yeah, repurposing is the way to go. And after 2040, if Jason's right, you won't
Yeah,
really have much choice but to be repurposing. So you might want to start practicing now.
this is it. Even if it's just a temporary thing, just to practice makes perfect. But so yeah, even plastic bottles, cut the bottom off or cut a slot in the bottom, and then put them in the ground and use them for watering roots and things like tomato plants. They want the water down the bottom, and they take quite a lot of water, and it because if you don't put enough water on it, the roots will then try and grow upwards because it's like, oh, there's water above, so the roots will start growing the wrong way as well. So that's one use. uh, the toilet roll card middles are a wonderful thing for beans as well. Any shoots that need protection, because that will disintegrate anyway, and it will become sort of composted in the process over several months. So there's a lot of things.
Well, well, the earth, whatever it is, can recycle anything, including plastic. I think
Yeah,
plastic gets a bad rap. I think it gets a bad rap because plastic, and I know we have way too much packaging in general for sure. It's just ridiculous. We have way too many products, way too much stuff. But
yeah,
plastic is Yeah, it's just the excess of it that's gotten so out of hand, but yeah, plastic I mean, you could even take plastic bottles, fill them up with sand, and build with those. And
Yeah,
there are these people down the road from here, they build with, bags filled with dirt, and they have these houses that they build. I can't remember what they're called now, but, yeah, and you should see their house. It's awesome, and it's so well insulated, and they built in fireplaces and cooking apparatuses, everything built in with just bags full of dirt.
fantastic. But you get really thick walls as well, and the nice thing is you if you're building it yourself, you know you're going to know that structure more than anybody else. And of
Right.
course, it's
I'll post their link, to their channel because it's really cool that they're actually friends of friends because she's a tattoo artist. The woman, it's a couple with 2 sons,
yeah,
and, have some friends that have been tattooed by her, and it's just really cool what they've done. It's amazing. Just yeah, and they did it all by themselves with their 2 kids.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Um. Yes. So yeah, I mean that's again part of that mandatory testing. That's one hell of a test on yourself. How resourceful can you be? Because this you can pull up the 1881 census for England and Wales free online. You pick a small settlement like a village, and you just look at the list of occupations. You've got um, broom and brush makers, shoemakers, blacksmiths, whitesmiths, um, various other trades that have all but vanished. Because at one time, with a village community, you go to the blacksmith, and if it's a fork and one of the prongs is broken off, you get him to fix it again for you. There'd be no buying a new one, or if the handle's worn out, then you'd have a new one attached. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could wake up in the morning and think, right, rather than making terracotta plant pots today in an oven, I'd like to turn my hand to blowing glass or something, or have a go at growing. And you'd have such a varied skill set, and you find the things you enjoy doing most, which is generally, I would say, you if you're good at something, that encourages you anyway, and it's something you enjoy, so you want to do more of it. And it you sort of it makes it like a sort of say a crashed economy because you can sort of produce so much that you can sort of distribute it really cheaply and help more people and build a community that way. I feel.
Yeah, there's just so much potential in cooperation and compassion and consideration and caring and working like that instead of everybody worrying about not having enough, hoarding what they do have, keeping separate, everybody just keeping to themselves, them and their family, and that's it. And everybody else, every person for themselves out there. So yeah, that's not working real well, and it's we're meant to be around other people in community and do things together and not always just be online and looking at boxes all the time. We
Well,
live in a box, drive in a box, we're always staring at a box. We need to get back to real people community.
yeah, interaction with living plants and things as well. It's an interesting thing, like family. Now, what actually is that? Because coming from a like a family historian side, it becomes apparent when you go back through the generations, you get all these different surnames coming in, and you start. It's like, well, where do you draw the line and say what is family and what isn't family? Because there's like a common bloodline with so many people. So that whole concept just falls out the window, or are you going to do it just on labels of a surname and say, right, you're in this family or that family. But then the way it's done,
Real family is a vibrational connection, being in the same vibrational frequency. That's who your real family is.
yeah, it also means to me that you've actually got an infinite number of siblings, and there's no generation as such. There's no differentiation. There's no generations because there's no time or space aspect to that. It's purely in an energy form. So it doesn't matter if one's 5 years old and the other one's 85 years old. They're still siblings. It's it's a radically different concept of the avatar attachment.
We're all brothers and sisters.
Well, a lot of times, one of the objections is, "Oh, I can't do this because of it'd be a family member," and it's like that's not holding you back in a way. Um, there possibly will come a time when the entire concept of what is family completely changes. I feel it has to as we move into this new dynamic. I go with
Yeah,
the
that time is now.
yeah, I go with the Rudolf Steiner sort of way of explaining it, that we're transitioning uh, into six senses rather than five. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. So where this new sense is heart centered, and it's about being creative. It sort of puts art where it should be. It's art is guiding humanity anyway, and there is an art in everything. It also diffuses arguments because art is subjective. So it's just personal preferences on whether you, like in the case of a painting or a sculpture, it's like, well, I like this, but I don't like that. But it doesn't make it wrong that somebody else likes it. You could have two people standing right next to each other in a pub listening to a live band, and one will love it and the other one will be indifferent to it. But they're both there at the same time, having the same experience. But it comes down to how they feel. Does it resonate? It doesn't make it right or wrong, does it?
Yeah, it's all about frequency, all about resonance.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're all getting to realize now, and that's how everything works, including manifesting, because when you're at that heightened emotional state, like you will be when you get whatever your intention is on achieving or acquiring, then you change your resonance. You get at that resonance where it'll sync up and voila.
Well, one of the sayings I've heard people saying, I'm really buzzing. Well, that's vibration, really. My my experience of that feeling of elation, it's it's not like it's not exactly extreme happiness. It's just a heightened contentedness, I think is the best way I can describe it. But it's just wow. But it's not like a temporary wow. It then stays with you. It's like, oh, you, you may not, well, you won't see anything different with the physical eyes, but with the mind's eye, I can't even describe it. It's a beautiful, I was going to say picture, but I can't even really call it a picture. I can't even find the words for this. Um, yeah, it's all in the feeling, and it's like, oh yes, and it's it's still there, and it's like, well, that's now an experience I can draw on as well. I can learn from the negative experiences, but the positive ones I can also draw on because they all help. I mean, the way I the way I looked at the situation, it's another very common saying people will come out with is, well, have you tried talking to them? Well, that's one to internalize as well. So I've dabbled at drawing, I've dabbled at writing, and various other things. And so it's like, okay, let's go and talk. Let's let's confront one of my shadows, which is the ego, the one that's trying to push me in all sorts of weird ways, showing me different experiences and things. It's like, okay, look, here's the deal. I cannot guarantee this, but if we do a really good job, sounds like a famous person at a world conference. We do a really good job. We can reduce. No, it's like maybe maybe 500 years time. We're not going to know in this present form, but something I write or something I create might have a profound influence on the future of humanity. So it's saying to the ego, how does that sound? Now the ego loves this. The ego can feed off this indefinitely now because it's potential. I don't know. I'm not lying to the ego and saying it definitely will happen. I'm saying honestly to this internal dialogue, it's like, well, it could happen. So are you going to work with me? That's like with Michael Harrell, Spirit, will you work with me? Well, use all you've got. What have we got? What do we all come into this world with? We've all got these emotions. Well, let's get them all working in one direction. So all pulling in the same direction rather than this conflict within oneself and this part of me wants to go over there and this part wants to eat and let's find a happy balance between all aspects of myself and start going down a different route. And
Right.
so
And the
far,
more conflict that you have in yourself, the more conflict you have in the outside world too.
yeah. Well, I'll share my sort of experience. Um, there's times like today, it's like partly my fault, but it's like I don't really want to go out there when it's damp and the pavements haven't even dried out, but I can sort of manage. But it's going to put a bit of pressure on me this week, but I acknowledge that. And there are times when it's like, phew, can't see a way forward. But I just hold on to that sort of feeling that and that self belief that by the end of the day things will have turned around. And sure enough, they do. And it's like, well, how many more times is fear and doubt going to come up to me? And it's like, how many? I don't even need to listen to them. It's like, yeah, I've heard what you're saying. You can go and sit down again because I know different from
Get out of my face, fear and doubt.
sorry.
So get out of my face, fear and doubt.
Yeah, it's that saying when one door closes, another one opens. Well, the doors that are marked fear and doubt, they're the ones to firmly shut and seal up, and they will open. It will force other doors to open, or they will then open. And yeah, it doesn't look that dramatically different in many ways. Certainly from a material perspective, it doesn't great, as it were. But internally, and how I feel and how I feel about each new day definitely has in a very positive way. So I can face the days. Um, it's given me a certain amount of freedom. And again, look at what this reality is presenting. It's a continuous bombardment of bright lights, distractions, fear stories, all things it's the adversary. It's adding verses. It's adverts. It's trying to get your attention. It's trying to get you to spend money on this or get you to look at that. It's trying to implant a feeling. It's trying to give you a bad script. Well, the world's a stage, and we're all actors on this stage. And the death of an actor's career, as Hollywood shows, is to take a bad script. It's like, let me have a look at this script. It's like, no, I can write a better one. I can use that as a basis, but now I can edit it and I can rewrite it and do an overwrite. A bit like in a computer, you overwrite something because they're based on us. Everything in this reality is based on the human mind and human physiology. I would say, I would even go so far as to say, going with what Jason has shown with the Great Pyramid of Giza as being a countdown clock and having a countdown coding put in it, this so-called junk DNA that is in us has got the same coding in it. And one of the things I will point to in this is if you look at that schematic of the King's Chamber, you've got that thing above it, which is a bit like a phallus. You've got the Queen's Chamber. You've got the gallery. That's a sort of a bigger area. And it looks like there was something sort of opened and shut, went up and down. That's, I would say, like the equivalent of, you're at the heart of the pyramid in that Queen's Chamber. That's the heart of us. Now you've got the gut, that's that lower chamber. And I feel that is an expression based on human physiology. And I feel that the mind that could create that with that mathematical accuracy and all that encodes, it would also be quite capable of encoding our DNA. And it's like looking at various channels and various people that are all saying similar things or questioning similar things. It's like it's talked of as spiritual downloads. Well, they're the apps to the avatar, and it's activating new things within inside us. This is a wonderful experience. Physically, sometimes it can feel horrible because one of the things people have often said is, "Oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that." It's like, well, yeah, you've opened up to experience things. So what do you expect? You're now experiencing new things. Embrace it. Go
You have to
past the
feel the pain to appreciate the pleasure.
yeah. Was it Lana Alabonte? She said, "Feeling is healing." It's all in feeling. So, whoa, I'm feeling something. I don't like that feeling, but I know the experience of it. I can put a label on that feeling. I can give that feeling a character. I recognize it if it comes up again. It's like the butterflies. Oh, there's anxiety. It's like, you're all right. You stay there. Settle
Yeah,
down.
you gotta feel it to heal it.
The other one is think like a child. So when a child comes up with these imaginary things and sees in the shadows in the bedroom, and what does a child do? They go under the covers, they block their eyes and ears, they shut the outside world out and wish it to be gone. And
it works.
yeah, generally they are just imaginations that have conjured up these things, and there's nothing real about them at all. I'm not saying there aren't entities. I feel there are.
They're real, but they're not real. It just depends. They're real, but they can't hurt you. And they especially can't hurt you if you're at certain vibrations. I mean, sometimes they can interfere with things and come into you. Those energies can, no doubt. But if you're at the proper resonance and maybe good energies come in you, I don't know. Maybe there's always something coming in here, hanging out with our parts of self. But yeah, it's all about your resonance with that kind of stuff. And of course, a scared little kid, things can't happen, but that whole blocking it out is a great, a great strategy. And I used to do it too. I used to be really scared when I was a kid.
Well, the thing is, you're shutting it out. You're not attacking it. You're not fighting it with a negative energy and feeding it. As adults, we seem to forget that we've got this ability to do this, because it's one of these things of this separation of imagination, like it doesn't count. But you've only got to look at this reality to see that, look around at anything and everything. Somebody's imagination created that chair that you're sitting on, that created that device that you're listening to this on. That started in somebody's imagination somewhere, and it's become a reality. So I'm not going to deny these things. I mean, I've seen these like dark entity, demonic things. They're a bit like the Harry Potter Dementors, I think now. They're like black, shadowy, vaguely humanoid, with black cloaks of nothingness. Now, it doesn't mean that's what they look like. I feel that we're often shown things in a way that we'll understand. It would be pointless showing the things to us otherwise. And it's
Right.
just,
We all have our own individual reality stream. Totally. Like everybody has their own reality. So exclusive.
yeah. I mean, I've never seen this archetypical sort of Satan figure with a goat's head and cloven feet. And as far as I know, in the sort of fossil record or anything, there isn't anything that is even like that. But if people want to see that, then that's up to them. But again, it's like this demonization and twisting of things. It's like, well, if you didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, if you weren't shown the tree of life, you'd pretty much be a robot. You wouldn't have that ability to weigh things up, and I feel this is really what this whole experience is about, is to gain experience, to, like you say, God's in training. So
And
what
make
world?
decisions. You always have to make decisions, this or that, right or wrong, black or white, It's all about those decisions and how that's gonna take you forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a floor and a bed and a table. Now they're distinct and they're different and they're contrasting. Otherwise, how would I tell one from the other if they're all molecularly connected? They would fuse as one thing, and it would just be one great big thing that's not one thing or the other. um, so, and the same with this reality. You're shown, it's like an artist painting a sky, which is mostly white clouds. You got to put in impressions to bring out definition to other things. So you're faced with an external world of contrast. But how many people honestly can say they've seen child trafficking firsthand? I know a lot of people have been victims, and I don't mean to diminish or discredit, but I'm saying for everybody else, how much of everything that you're being shown do you know to be 100% true? And that being the case, are these things that are going to benefit you by focusing on them? And I'd say a lot of the things, no. But I feel I'm at the level where I can distinguish good from bad. I can distinguish how to create things in a way that doesn't cause harm. I'm not saying I've perfected it. And again, it's all practice, practice, practice continuously with this. This doesn't stop. Every footstep I take, being aware, and it's like, what am I thinking? What am I putting out there? How's that going to affect everybody else? And it's like driving. We're driving an avatar in this reality. Now, if you're driving a vehicle, ideally you should be aware of all other road users, all potentials, all potential things that can happen. So I would sort of then import that blueprint into daily life. And it's actually sounds easier than it is, but it is one of these things, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It gets to the point
Yeah,
where, you,
being self-aware is key. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that's where it all starts. Is having that self-awareness, being
yeah,
mindful of every move you make, considering how it's going to affect your reality bubble, which is going to overlap with others' reality bubbles. So, and on and on. So, yeah. And and if you're doing everything with good intention and being mindful, that's all you need to do. Uh,
yeah.
You're doing it.
The system again is a perfect teacher for this. It teaches by repetition, like say it's learning the words of a national anthem or your 12 times table. It's through repetition. Well, we can do that, but we can now do it for something better. And it's making everything so it's second nature within us. So it's not as complex as it sounds. It's like a lot of people, they hear a song on the radio and you can sing along to it, but now try and write the words down. But what you find is when you hear that first keyword, like say Bohemian Rhapsody, I can all I got to do is think of the phrase, "Is this the real life?" And then the rest just comes. This is just fantasy, caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. And it's just that first phrase. Then the rest will just flow. You don't actually have to remember word for word, and that same principle can be applied to how we what's the word? How we perform, how we present ourselves. I mean, we're a presence. We're described as being a presence, a living presence. So present ourselves as a present, as a gift in the present, as a present. Funny how it's one word and it's got all these different meanings. I find that
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah, say that fast 3 times.
Yeah. Oh, present yourself as a present in the present, as a present in the present, as a presence. Don't know if I can do it 3 times.
Presently.
But yeah, it's making everything it's making everything second nature, so it just flows inside yourself. So it's like basically I can just it becomes like you haven't got to dial the number, you just press the memorized number and it's there. It just will come when you need it. And
Yeah, you
that's the
just get
thing.
in the zone. You get in the zone and you just flow through life like, really good athletes do, that are really good at whatever it is, and or musicians is a better
Yeah,
example because I don't really like sports and competition and all that. But yeah, like you watch somebody like Carlos Santana play the guitar, it's effortless for him. It's
yeah,
just second nature. Jimi Hendrix is another one, and
yeah.
that's how we need to be with our magic and our manifesting, and yeah, just having it second nature, like you said.
I'm marvel at the way I watch some conductors and they will conduct a symphony and they've got no score in front of them, and it's like they've got that level of understanding and they're giving their interpretation on an entire piece of music which may be 30 minutes long, and it's like they've got to know all those players' parts. But then we are the conductor of our body, our orchestral body. So you've got your string section, which is the emotion. You've got your woodwind, which is the spirit. You've got the brass, which is the sort of more earthly bits, and then you've got the timpani, which is the instruments that are struck. They're the things that make the first impressions. They're at the back of the orchestra, but they're like at the front of the eye. So it's very much like that sort of layout of an orchestra. The conductor does not see the audience. He's got his back to the audience. So it's conveyed in through the sound, through the emotion, through the music, through the art, and its potential. I mean, how big is the audience? How big is the venue? And I like to use that analogy as well. It's how we conduct ourselves, and it's also you've got the energy word conduct as well. There's nothing that isn't
You like
connected.
yourself like a conductor conducting.
Yeah. If you think of the members of the orchestra as your emotions, so you want to know what your string players are doing. You want to know what the woodwind section and the brass and the timpani has got to come in at the right time. It mustn't be too fast, mustn't be too slow. You've got to have the overall picture of the symphony and put it together and present it in a way that you want to give your best performance every time. It's fascinating listening. There's one conductor, Chelabadaka. His words were, I approach a piece of music like it's the first time, and I'll go through it again and I'll see it with fresh eyes. And I thought that's because to me, I get the spiritual aspect. To me, it works the way he communicates it. On some piece, not on every piece of music. This is the thing. I can like some artists for some things, but in other things, it's like that's not really for me. But I don't condemn the artists.
Yeah, every moment is the first moment of that moment.
Yeah, I feel art as well. Hugely underrated is a composer called Karl Orff, who's known as like this one-hit wonder, Carmina Burana. He did an awful lot of work using music and rhythm for so it's music for children, and conducting is like halfway between a dance and sort of a meditation. It's a sort of free flowing expression, and it doesn't matter what you do, as it were. You just move with the music, and it can become a very beautiful thing to do, and you just let it flow through you naturally and internalize. Oh, what does that sound bring out into me? Where am I feeling it within myself? You know which pieces of music resonate with you from experience of hearing them before as well, and of course you can always try something new. So I feel that's a beautiful sort of guide. Looking at I'm very much moving over towards looking at art, because art is creation, and I finding it fascinating. It's till about a month ago I didn't know I could draw. I'm quite shocked, but I'm sort of learning as I go, and I'm learning to see with the eyes of an artist with drawing, and how I've got to build it up in layers, start with the things furthest away where the natural tendency is to try and put the detail in first, not do the bigger picture. And also that wanted to get it perfect and turn out a masterpiece every time. And of course it takes practice.
Well, that's a good point, that you need to look at the bigger picture and work, in from that. And on that note, I think that's a good opportunity for us to go ahead and stop. It's been about an hour and a half, and
Yes.
some really, really good stuff here. You always have so much to say, so I don't want to give too much out there, because it's like drinking water out of a fire hydrant if you get too much going. So But
Well, the
yeah,
people,
thanks for having this talk, and the future is bright, huh?
yeah. Well, it's funny. I was saying earlier. I said I've got a Zoom meeting with Julia later. I said, don't know what we're going to talk about. I said, but it'll just unfold organically, as it always does.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's just flows, just flows. So thank you everybody for listening, and remember to stay focused on what you want, and always help others if you can. And we will talk to you next time. And thank you so much, James. This was fun.
Thank you, audience.
Ciao, ciao.